We were used as a guinea pig twice, first as a target, second as an object of medical research.
The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were two horrific incidents that occurred during World War II. Do you have any idea what the impact of these two bombs had on Japan?
Should human beings be treated like that? We are not created to be burned like garbage.
Join us as we look at what happened to the bodies just after the Hiroshima bomb exploded. Introduction. On August 6, 1945, the United States unleashed an atomic bomb code named Little Boy on Hiroshima, a major Japanese city. The explosion and accompanying radiation caused widespread destruction and loss of life, with the immediate death toll estimated to be between 70,000 and 80,000 individuals. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, a second atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man, was detonated on Nagasaki, causing additional destruction and fatalities. The death toll in Nagasaki was estimated at 40,000 to 70,000 persons. The two bombings prompted Japan's capitulation and the end of World War II. The use of atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki remains a contentious and divisive issue due to the tremendous loss of life and long-term health implications for survivors. It also brought up ethical and moral concerns concerning the use of nuclear weapons in wartime. Marie and Pierre Curie. Marie and Pierre Curie, a married couple, were prominent scientists known for their groundbreaking work on radiation. They conducted pioneering research on radioactivity, which Marie coined. They discovered the radioactive elements polonium and radium, which transformed our understanding of atomic physics. Marie Curie was the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize and is still the only person to have received 2 Nobel Prizes in distinct scientific categories. She was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903, together with Pierre Curie and Henri Becquerel, and the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1911 for her work on radioactivity. During World War I, she created transportable radiography machines to provide X-ray treatments in field hospitals. This discovery saved numerous lives by improving the diagnosis of military injuries. Curie's research paved the way for advances in nuclear physics, cancer, and radiography. Their research on radioactivity had a significant impact on science and medicine, influencing how we comprehend and use radiation today. Marie Curie's commitment to science, pioneering research, and tenacity in the face of adversity have left an indelible impression on the scientific community and continue to inspire future generations of scientists worldwide. Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was a distinguished physicist who made groundbreaking contributions to theoretical physics. He is best known for his relativity theory, which covers both the special and general theories. These theories significantly altered our view of space, time, and gravity, sparking revolutionary advances in physics. Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared, explains how mass may be turned into energy and vice versa. This concept has had a profound impact on nuclear physics and energy generation. In 1921, Einstein received the Nobel Prize in Physics for his explanation of the photoelectric effect, which helped lay the groundwork for quantum theory. While Einstein is best recognized for his work on relativity, he also made significant contributions to quantum theory, particularly through his critiques of some aspects of quantum mechanics. Einstein was a prominent supporter of civil rights, nonviolence, and international collaboration. He rose to prominence in popular culture, serving as a symbol of scientific genius. Albert Einstein's work continues to inspire physicists and scientists around the world, altering our view of the universe and leaving an indelible mark on the discipline of theoretical physics. Ernest Rutherford. Ernest Rutherford, a pioneering scientist, made fundamental contributions to nuclear physics and the study of atomic structure. Rutherford is best known for discovering the atomic nucleus and developing the nuclear model of atoms. Rutherford established that atoms had a small, dense, positively charged nucleus at their center, surrounded by orbiting electrons in the classic gold foil experiment, which he carried out with his colleagues Hans Geiger and Ernest Marsden in 1909. Rutherford made significant contributions to our understanding of radioactivity and radioactive decay processes. He recognized and classified the 3 major categories of radioactive emissions: alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. Rutherford's work on alpha particle scattering resulted in the formulation of the Rutherford scattering formula, which revealed insights into the structure of atomic nuclei and helped to validate the atom's nuclear model. Rutherford received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1908 for his research on elemental disintegration and radioactive material chemistry. Rutherford's effect went beyond his own studies. He had a tremendous impact on mentoring and motivating a new generation of physicists, including future Nobel laureates Niels Bohr and James Chadwick. Ernest Rutherford's contributions to nuclear physics and the understanding of atomic structure paved the way for many subsequent advances in the subject, cementing his place as a prominent player in modern physics history. Niels Bohr. Niels Bohr, a Danish physicist, is best recognized for his pioneering work in quantum theory and atomic structure. In 1913, he proposed the Bohr model, a groundbreaking atomic model. This model used both classical and quantum physics ideas to describe the structure of atoms, specifically the hydrogen atom. It introduced the concept of quantized energy levels for electrons in atoms, which served as the foundation for current quantum mechanics. Bohr made significant contributions to the development of quantum theory, particularly in understanding electron behavior in atoms and the emission of electromagnetic radiation. His work contributed to the understanding of both conventional physics and quantum mechanics. Bohr proposed the principle of complementarity, which argues that particles can display both wave-like and particle-like behavior, but not simultaneously. This notion has important consequences for comprehending the dual nature of light and matter. Bohr contributed much to our understanding of nuclear structure and reaction mechanisms. His work on the liquid drop model of the atomic nucleus contributed significantly to the advancement of nuclear physics. Niels Bohr was given the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1922 for his research on the structure of atoms and the radiation they emit. His original ideas and contributions to quantum theory and atomic structure shaped the evolution of modern physics and continue to affect the discipline today. Shadow over Europe. The growth of Nazism culminated with Hitler becoming chancellor in 1933 and then solidifying his authority, resulting in the foundation of a fascist dictatorship in Germany. This time was characterized by the suppression of political opposition, the implementation of discriminatory legislation against minorities, particularly Jews, and the pursuit of aggressive expansionist goals that eventually cast a pall over Europe and culminated to World War II. The term the atomic gamble usually refers to the decision-making process and the implications of using nuclear weapons, specifically the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. The atomic gamble entailed strategic calculations, ethical concerns, and the consequences of using nuclear bombs to end the war in Japan. The decision to use atomic bombs is still debated, with debates centered on whether the bombings were necessary to quickly end the war and preserve lives, or whether they were an unacceptable act of mass destruction. Both topics are significant historical events with far-reaching effects that continue to affect our knowledge of politics, warfare, and ethical decision-making in the modern world. Werner Heisenberg. Werner Heisenberg, a German physicist, made significant contributions to the development of quantum mechanics. He is most known for developing the uncertainty principle, a basic idea in quantum theory that stipulates that the more precisely a particle's position is known, the less precisely its momentum can be determined, and vice versa. This idea injected an element of indeterminacy into physics, substantially altering how scientists interpret the behavior of particles at the subatomic level. Heisenberg also contributed significantly to matrix mechanics, a quantum mechanics formalism he co-developed with Max Born and Pascual Jordan. This study paved the way for the full development of quantum mechanics and was critical in describing particle behavior at the atomic and subatomic levels. During World War II, Heisenberg was active in Germany's nuclear energy program, also known as the German nuclear bomb project. The amount of Heisenberg's role, as well as his intentions, are still debated in history. Following the war, Heisenberg was instrumental in the restoration of science in Germany and became an advocate for the peaceful use of nuclear energy. He received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1932 for developing quantum mechanics, which recognized his pioneering contributions to theoretical physics. Manhattan Project. During World War II, the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada conducted a top-secret research and development initiative known as the Manhattan Initiative. The major goal was to create the first atomic bombs. The project was called after the Manhattan Engineer District of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, which oversaw the program. The Manhattan Project concluded with the successful test explosion of the first atomic weapon on July 16, 1945, at the Trinity test site in New Mexico. 2 atomic bombs, nicknamed Little Boy and Fat Man, were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6 and 9, 1945, respectively. The bombings prompted Japan's capitulation and the end of World War II. Many well-known scientists worked on the Manhattan Project, including J. Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, and Niels Bohr. The scientific and technological advances made during the Manhattan Project transformed nuclear physics and had a significant impact on global politics, resulting in the Cold War weapons race between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Manhattan Project remains a watershed moment in human history, emphasizing the ethical, moral, and security concerns involved with nuclear weapons, as well as the responsibility that comes with using such powerful technologies. Einstein and Szilard's letter. The Einstein-Szilard letter is a key letter written by scientist Albert Einstein to President Franklin D. Roosevelt on August 2, 1939. Physicist Leo Szilard co-signed the letter, which voiced alarm over Nazi Germany's probable development of atomic weapons. In the letter, Einstein and Szilard discussed the prospect of using nuclear fission for military reasons and encouraged the United States government to examine the ramifications of such technology. This letter was essential in the formation of the Manhattan Project, the United States government's research and development project to build the first atomic bombs during World War II. The urgency portrayed in the Einstein-Szilard letter influenced the U.S. government's decision to prioritize atomic weapons research, which eventually led to the development of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Einstein-Szilard letter emphasized the ethical quandaries and moral problems linked with scientific advances, notably in the field of nuclear technology. It also emphasized the tremendous influence that scientists could have on political decisions and global events through their knowledge and activism. Robert Oppenheimer. Robert Oppenheimer was an American theoretical physicist who played a crucial role in the creation of the atomic bomb during World War II. He is commonly referred to as the father of the atomic bomb. Oppenheimer is best known as the scientific head of the Manhattan Project, the clandestine U.S. government operation that created the first nuclear weapons. Oppenheimer was instrumental in arranging and monitoring the scientific research and testing that resulted in the successful detonation of the first atomic bomb in July 1945. Following the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Oppenheimer advocated for worldwide nuclear control and criticized the nuclear arms race. Despite his scientific contributions and leadership in the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer's career was marked by controversy during the McCarthy era. He was accused of communist tendencies and underwent a security clearance hearing, which resulted in his security clearance being revoked in 1954. This episode resulted in Oppenheimer's exclusion from government research and a subsequent move toward teaching and scholarly endeavors. Robert Oppenheimer's legacy is multifaceted, with his scientific accomplishments and role in the development of the atomic bomb standing alongside ethical and moral concerns about the use of nuclear weapons. He is recognized as a great physicist whose life and work were influenced by the moral quandaries and political issues of the 20th century. Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman was an American theoretical physicist best recognized for his contributions to quantum mechanics, quantum electrodynamics, and particle physics. He was also an accomplished educator, author, and bongo musician. He is well recognized for his work on Feynman diagrams, which are graphical representations of mathematical statements in quantum field theory. These diagrams are commonly used in particle physics to represent particle interactions and calculate probabilities. Feynman contributed significantly to the creation of quantum electrodynamics, a quantum field theory that describes the interactions of electrons, positrons, and photons. His diagrams transformed the profession and offered a new approach to difficult computations in particle physics. Feynman, along with Julian Schwinger and Shinichiro Tominaga, received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1965 for their essential contributions to quantum electrodynamics. Feynman was renowned for his ability to communicate complicated scientific topics in simple words. His lectures, particularly the Feynman Lectures on Physics, are renowned for their clarity, insight, and wit. Feynman was instrumental in the investigation of the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger catastrophe. During the televised proceedings, he demonstrated O-ring failure in frigid temperatures using a glass of ice water, which helped to explain the reason of the tragedy. Richard Feynman's contributions to theoretical physics, innovative teaching methods, and fascinating personality established him as one of the 20th century's most prominent physicists. His work continues to inspire scientists and students worldwide. The Hidden Metropolis, Los Alamos National Laboratory. Los Alamos National Laboratory is a U.S. Department of Energy national laboratory in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Los Alamos was founded during World War II as part of the Manhattan Project and was instrumental in the construction of the first atomic bomb. It was the principal location where the atomic bomb was created, tested, and manufactured. Unmasking life in Los Alamos. During the Manhattan Project, Los Alamos was a carefully controlled and covert enclave where scientists, engineers, and other personnel collaborated to create nuclear weapons. Personal experiences, obstacles, and ethical quandaries experienced by individuals involved in this breakthrough but contentious research may provide useful insights into the human side of scientific and historical events. Exploring the daily lives, relationships, and interactions of the people who lived in Los Alamos at the time could give light on the more personal aspects of their participation in scientific projects with far-reaching consequences. Project Y. Project Y, also known as the Los Alamos Laboratory, was the code name for the Manhattan Project's scientific study and development of the atomic bomb during World War II. Project Y, led by physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, gathered some of the world's top scientists, engineers, and military personnel to work on the design and production of the atomic bomb. Enrico Fermi, the Nobel laureate. Enrico Fermi's contributions to physics, particularly in quantum mechanics, particle physics, and nuclear energy, have left an indelible mark on the discipline and continue to influence scientific study and technological breakthroughs to this day. Nicholas Metropolis. Nicholas Metropolis was a Greek-American physicist and mathematician who made significant contributions to computational science, particularly statistical mechanics and computer simulations. His pioneering work in computational methods and algorithms has had a substantial impact on modern scientific research and computational procedures, and his work continues to be important in a variety of fields. Children of Los Alamos. The expression "Children of Los Alamos" refers to the heritage and viewpoints of those who grew up in Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project era. Exploring their experiences, reflections, and stories may provide a personal and nuanced understanding of life in a community at the cutting edge of scientific discovery and historical events. By diving into the lives, experiences, and viewpoints of Los Alamos' children, one can acquire a better understanding of the intertwining forces of science, secrecy, community, and history that shaped this unique chapter in American and scientific history. The Trinity test and the inception of a new era. Dawn of destruction. The Trinity test and the beginning of a new era commemorate the momentous detonation of the first nuclear bomb on July 16, 1945, at the Trinity test site near Alamogordo, New Mexico. This test was a watershed moment in history, indicating the effective completion of the Manhattan Project's attempts to produce atomic bombs during World War II. Overall, the Trinity test was a watershed moment in history that signaled the beginning of the nuclear age and ushered in a new era defined by the possession of nuclear weapons and the long-term repercussions of their existence. Physicist Isidore Rabi. Isidore Rabi, an American physicist, made fundamental contributions to quantum mechanics, molecular physics, and nuclear physics. His contributions to the Manhattan Project, as well as his work in NMR spectroscopy and atomic physics, have had a long-term impact on science and technology. His pioneering research paved the way for significant advances in physics and instrumentation, influencing our understanding of the natural world at the atomic and molecular levels. Trinitite. Trinitite, also known as Alamogordo glass or atomic glass, is a glassy, greenish material produced after the first nuclear test explosion, codenamed Trinity, on July 16, 1945 in New Mexico. The explosion occurred as part of the Manhattan Project, the United States government's top-secret endeavor to create nuclear weapons during World War II. Trinitite created when the extreme heat of the atomic bomb explosion melted the surrounding sand, earth, and other materials, fusing them together to form a glass-like substance. The color of Trinitite can range from green to yellow to red, depending on the nature of the components melted during the explosion. Following the Trinity test, Trinitite samples were gathered for study, and the region surrounding the test site was later declared off-limits to prevent unlawful access and removal of radioactive material. Trinitite is a unique and tactile reminder of nuclear weapons' devastating force, as well as the environmental consequences of nuclear testing. While Trinitite is not currently radioactive, it should be handled with caution due to its history with nuclear testing. Trinitite has become a collector's item and historical artifact for some, proving to be a tangible reminder of the beginning of the nuclear age and the events surrounding the Trinity test. The Potsdam Conference and the crosshairs. On Hiroshima and Nagasaki, silhouettes of shadow, Potsdam Conference. The Potsdam Conference was a World War II meeting of Allied commanders that took place in Potsdam, Germany, from July 17th to August 2nd, 1945. Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and United States President Harry S. Truman all attended the summit. The Potsdam Conference, which followed the Yalta Conference, sought to establish a post-war order and solve critical concerns confronting the Allied powers. The Potsdam Conference had a profound impact on the post-war order in Europe and Asia, setting the framework for Germany's reorganization and the start of the Cold War. It represented the changing dynamics among the Allied nations and laid the groundwork for the geopolitical problems that would define the post-war period. In the shadow of Prometheus, the birth of Little Boy and Fat Man. The two atomic bombs produced by the United States during World War II as part of the Manhattan Project were codenamed Little Boy and Fat Man. The birth of Little Boy and Fat Man marked a watershed moment in human history, exposing the world to the destructive power of nuclear weapons and ushering in the nuclear age. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings were historically momentous events that had long-term consequences for international relations, nuclear arms control, and global security. Robert Christie. Robert F. Christie was a prominent American theoretical physicist who made significant contributions to nuclear physics, astrophysics, and stellar structure. Christie was a key figure in the Manhattan Project, the United States government's World War II research and development project to create the first atomic weapons. He collaborated with other notable physicists, such as J. Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, and Hans Bethe, on calculations for nuclear weapon design and development. A flash that fractured time. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima, a Japanese city, was devastated by an atomic attack during World War II. The bombing of Hiroshima was a pivotal moment in the last phases of World War II, with disastrous repercussions. The bombing of Hiroshima during World War II is still one of the most horrific incidents in contemporary history, demonstrating the deadly consequences of nuclear weapons and the need of remembering the victims while pushing for peace and nuclear non-proliferation. B-29 Bomber Hiroshima. The B-29 superfortress bomber that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima was dubbed the Enola Gay. Colonel Paul W. Tibbets, Jr. piloted the Enola Gay, a United States Army Air Force aircraft. During World War II, on August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay delivered the atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy to the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The bombing mission was part of the Manhattan Project, the U.S. government's top-secret effort to build nuclear weapons. The Enola Gay took off from Tinian in the Pacific and headed to Hiroshima, where it dropped the atomic bomb at 8:15 a.m. local time. The detonation of the atomic bomb from the Enola Gay produced massive destruction and devastation in Hiroshima, resulting in severe loss of life and long-term health consequences due to radiation exposure. The bombing of Hiroshima constituted a watershed moment in World War II, ushering in the nuclear age, with far-reaching consequences for global security and the employment of atomic weapons in conflict. Co-pilot Captain Robert Lewis. Captain Robert Lewis co-piloted the Enola Gay, the B-29 superfortress bomber that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima during World War II. He co-piloted the Enola Gay with Colonel Paul W. Tibbets, Jr., who flew the historic bombing mission. After the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, Captain Robert Lewis famously wrote in the aircraft's log, "My God, what have we done?" This moving reflection conveyed the initial shock and awareness of the atomic bomb's terrible impact on the city below. Captain Lewis's recorded statements have since become indicative of the moral and ethical issues surrounding the use of nuclear weapons in combat, as well as the long-term ramifications of the Hiroshima bombing. His reflection serves as a reminder of the enormous human effect and long-term consequences of that historic day. Aftermath of blast. The launching of the atomic bombing on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, was devastating and had far-reaching implications for the city and its inhabitants. It emphasizes the horrible human cost of nuclear warfare and serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of preventing the use of nuclear weapons, while also promoting international peace and security. Nagasaki. Echoes of the Second Thunder. The decision to bomb Nagasaki second was based on military considerations, strategic aims, and operational variables, and it helped to bring World War II to a close in the Pacific Theater. The city was chosen as a secondary target because of its industrial and military importance. The terrain of Nagasaki also played a role in the decision, as the city's layout made it a difficult target for bombing. Charles Sweeney. Charles Sweeney was a United States Army Air Forces officer and pilot who served during World War II. He is well recognized for his role in the atomic bombing of Nagasaki, the second and final use of a nuclear weapon in warfare. He flew the B-29 bomber known as Boxcar during the Nagasaki bombing mission on August 9, 1945. Boxcar carried the atomic bomb Fat Man, which was detonated on Nagasaki, Japan, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. Sweeney was the aircraft commander and pilot of Boxcar during the Nagasaki mission. The bombing of Nagasaki occurred 3 days after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and had a significant impact on Japan's decision to surrender, ultimately ending World War II. Sweeney had an impressive military career in the United States Army and later the United States Air Force. Following World War II, he continued to serve in a variety of jobs and leadership positions, receiving multiple military awards and decorations. After his military service, Charles Sweeney retired from the United States Air Force and followed a variety of professional interests. He wrote a biography called War's End, an eyewitness account of America's last atomic mission, in which he described his events leading up to and during the Nagasaki bombing mission. His participation in this historic event has fueled ongoing discussions and arguments about the use of nuclear weapons and warfare. Aftermath. The aftermath of Nagasaki's atomic attack on August 9, 1945, was devastating for the city and its population. The detonation of the atomic bomb over Nagasaki resulted in a huge explosion and shockwave, destroying buildings, infrastructure, and dwellings throughout the impact zone. The blast's intense heat and pressure caused massive damage and the loss of life. It led to an estimated 40,000 to 70,000 deaths and thousands of severe injuries. The atomic explosion caused many victims to suffer burns, trauma, and radiation illness. The detonation of the atomic bomb released dangerous levels of radiation, resulting in acute and long-term health implications for survivors. Many people who were exposed to radiation acquired radiation sickness, cancer, genetic damage, and other radiation-related ailments in the days, weeks, and years after the bombing. The bombing of Nagasaki resulted in a humanitarian disaster, overwhelming local medical facilities and emergency personnel. The city struggled to provide medical care, housing, and relief to atomic bomb survivors, compounding their misery. Following the bombing, Nagasaki had the enormous burden of rebuilding and recovering from the catastrophe. Long-term planning, funding, and community support were required for efforts to rebuild infrastructure, reconstruct structures, and aid survivors. The tragedy of the Nagasaki bombing fueled initiatives for global peace, nuclear disarmament, and advocacy for nuclear abolition. Nagasaki has become a global symbol of remembering, healing, and peace-building activities. Dr. Takashi Nagai survived the bombing. Dr. Takashi Nagai, a Japanese physician, radiologist, was a survivor of Nagasaki's atomic bombardment. He was working at Nagasaki Medical College Hospital when the atomic attack occurred on August 9, 1945. The hospital was positioned around 1.5 kilometers from the bomb's hypocenter. Despite being outside the immediate blast zone, Dr. Nagai sustained major injuries and radiation exposure because of the bombing. He endured upper body and facial injuries, and his exposure to radiation resulted in long-term health concerns. Dr. Nagai's wife, Midori Nagai, was killed in the explosion, but he amazingly survived. After the bombing, Dr. Nagai continued to practice medicine and care for other survivors in the destroyed city. He dedicated his life to fostering peace, reconciliation, and healing following the atomic blast. He wrote numerous books and essays arguing for peace and spiritual regeneration during war and suffering. Dr. Takashi Nagai's personal narrative and message of peace and resilience have touched many people in Japan and around the world. His legacy lives on as a monument to the resilient spirit of hope, forgiveness, and compassion in the aftermath of tragedy and sorrow. Voices from the Shadow. Chronicles of the Hibakusha. The term Chronicles of the Hibakusha refers to a recounting of the experiences and stories of the hibakusha, who survived the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. The Japanese term hibakusha refers to people who were exposed to radiation from atomic explosions. The hibakusha suffered immediate and long-term consequences of the atomic blasts, including physical injuries, radiation sickness, psychological trauma, and the loss of loved ones. Their stories demonstrate their tenacity and bravery in the face of unthinkable sorrow. Many hibakusha had long-term health problems because of their exposure to radiation, including increased cancer risk, genetic alterations, and other radiation-related disorders. The documentation of their experiences emphasizes the continued impact of nuclear war on human life. The hibakusha's chronicles frequently include testimonies, memoirs, oral histories, and written recollections of their experiences prior to, during, and following the atomic blasts. These personal stories offer important insights into the horrors of nuclear war and the search for peace. The hibakusha have been essential in advocating for nuclear disarmament, peacekeeping, and preventing future nuclear disasters. Their words serve as striking reminders of the human toll of conflict and the critical need for world peace and healing. The hibakusha chronicles help to preserve the collective memory and historical documentation of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic explosions. Their experiences are a heartbreaking reminder of the dangers of nuclear weapons and the significance of sustaining peace for future generations. Chronicles of the hibakusha represents the ongoing legacy of atomic bomb survivors and their unflinching commitment to telling their stories, seeking justice, and campaigning for a future free of nuclear weapons. Sadako Sasaki. Sadako Sasaki was a Japanese girl who became a symbol of the aftermath of Hiroshima's atomic bombs during World War II. She was just 2 years old when the atomic bomb was launched on Hiroshima. Sadako originally survived the disaster, but got leukemia, sometimes known as atomic bomb disease, at the age of 11 as a result of radiation exposure from the bombing. Inspired by a Japanese belief that folding 1,000 origami cranes will grant a wish, Sadako began folding origami cranes in the hopes of recuperating from her illness and advocating for peace. She believed that folding the cranes would help her heal and create a world free of nuclear weapons. Eleanor Coer's book, Sadako and the 1,000 Paper Cranes, popularized Sadako's narrative, which recounts her life, illness, and ambition to fold 1,000 cranes. The book has subsequently been translated into several languages and is extensively used to teach children the value of peace and compassion. Despite her unrelenting attempts to fold 1,000 cranes, Sadako died on October 25, 1955, before achieving her goal. Her classmates and family members proceeded to fold the remaining cranes in her memory, and thousands of paper cranes are now on exhibit at Hiroshima's Children's Peace Monument. Sadako Sasaki's narrative has become a powerful symbol of innocent war victims, the dangers of nuclear weapons, and the desire of peace and reconciliation. Her legacy continues to inspire people all throughout the world to work for nuclear disarmament, peace education, and a more peaceful and caring world. Sadako Sasaki's fortitude, hope, and timeless message of peace, expressed through the symbolism of origami cranes, have left an indelible mark on generations, reflecting resilience and the spirit of peace in the face of tragedy. Sumiteru Taniguchi. Sumiteru Taniguchi survived the atomic bombing of Nagasaki during World War II and is a proponent of peace, nuclear disarmament, and the eradication of nuclear weapons. Taniguchi was 16 years old and working as a mail carrier in Nagasaki when the city was destroyed by the atomic bomb. He received serious burns all over his body because of the blast and radiation exposure. Taniguchi suffered extensive injuries, including severe burns that caused long-term damage and intense suffering. He had multiple surgeries and therapies over the years to address his injuries and the long-term health consequences of radiation exposure. Following his recuperation, Taniguchi became a strong champion for peace, nuclear disarmament, and raising awareness about the catastrophic impacts of nuclear weapons. He shared his own narrative and experiences to raise awareness about the horrors of war and the significance of avoiding nuclear conflict. Taniguchi's tenacity and dedication to promoting peace made him a symbol of the hibakusha movement. He traveled both domestically and internationally to share his testimony, participated in peace initiatives, and advocated for the elimination of nuclear weapons. Sumiteru Taniguchi's commitment to peace and tireless efforts to raise the voices of atomic bomb survivors had a long-lasting impact on the worldwide peace movement. His lobbying activities motivated others to strive for a world free of nuclear weapons and war. Kikuei Shiota. Kikuei Shiota survived the United States atomic bombing of Hiroshima, Japan, on August 6, 1945, during World War II. Shiota was 21 years old when the atomic bomb went off, and she was 2 kilometers away from the epicenter of the attack. Shiota recounts that a stunning, dazzling light enveloped Hiroshima, followed by an oily black rain. Shiota and her younger sister had to search through piles of dead and burning buildings to discover their missing brothers. The two discovered their brother's leg and skin dragging behind him, as well as their sister's garments burned into the road. Kikué said it was the most terrifying and devastating day of her life. Whispers of the Lost. The echoes of atomic devastation. The anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima is observed every year on August 6th. It was the first time nuclear bombs were used, and the bombing of Nagasaki occurred 3 days later. The bombings killed an estimated 150,000 people. What is the legacy of the atomic bombings, and how are they perceived in Japanese society? The world should not forget the carnage that nuclear weapons can cause. Almost 8 years after the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there is little public understanding of the dangers posed by nuclear weapons. There is an urgent need to raise public awareness of these threats and rally support for immediate action on weapons control, non-proliferation, and disarmament. Civil society has a critical role in increasing awareness and putting pressure on action. Nuclear weapons pose an existential threat to the globe, and we must not get complacent about the danger. The bombs have piqued little curiosity in Japan. Despite the bombing, the perception of America was not bad. The image of America has certainly changed since 1945. He stated what is great about reading Black Rain, a popular novel from the 1960s about the Hiroshima bombing by Masuji Ibuse, is that the reader does not feel very angry at America. This was due in part to General Douglas MacArthur's post-war Japanese control policy. Certainly, the devastated Japanese people felt enraged. MacArthur's strategy was to blame the Japanese military government rather than the Allied occupying soldiers. Another pacifying strategy employed by MacArthur was to censor anything that smelled of militarism from Japanese popular culture, while promoting Hollywood films and American pop culture such as jazz. Until 1964, Japanese citizens were not permitted to go abroad for recreation. As a result of the pictures presented by Hollywood, people imagined America to be a dreamland. However, by the end of the 1960s, America had been the target of political resentment due to its involvement in the Vietnam War. Following the bombings, the United Nations focused on eliminating the use of nuclear weapons. The catastrophic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki provided the impetus for the UN's work to prevent the use of weapons of mass destruction, especially nuclear weapons. The first General Assembly resolution, adopted in 1946, addressed nuclear disarmament. The United Nations has played an important role in reducing the hazards presented by nuclear weapons as a negotiating forum, norm setter, and implementation agency. The UN Secretary-General continues to promote and defend the goal of a nuclear-free world. Dr. Michihiko Hachiya. Dr. Michihiko Hachiya was a Japanese physician who oversaw the Hiroshima Communications Hospital in Hiroshima, Japan, during World War II. He survived the atomic explosion of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and continued to provide medical care to the injured despite the city's devastation. His eyewitness description of the bombing and its aftermath is recorded in his diary, Hiroshima Diary, which provides a moving and detailed account of the tragic events. Dr. Hachiya's diary describes his experiences prior to, during, and following the atomic explosion of Hiroshima. His letters provide a frightening and personal perspective on the bomb's immediate impact, the difficulties of treating the injured, and the tenacity of survivors in the face of tremendous carnage. Dr. Hachiya, as head of the Hiroshima Communications Hospital, was responsible for arranging medical care, triage, and treatment for the injured in the aftermath of the attack. His commitment to give care in the face of overwhelming circumstances exemplifies the resilience and humanity demonstrated at times of disaster. Following the war, Dr. Hachiya remained an advocate for peace, reconciliation, and the elimination of nuclear weapons. His experiences during Hiroshima's atomic attack inspired his devotion to promoting peace, international understanding, and preventing future nuclear disasters. Dr. Michihiko Hachiya's Hiroshima Diary is still a vital historical record of the human impact of the atomic blasts, as well as a monument to the ongoing search for peace and compassion in the face of catastrophe. His lobbying activities and documentation of the Hiroshima bombing have helped to shape public memory and comprehension of the devastating events of World War II. Dr. Michihiko Hachiya's legacy as a physician, survivor, and peace advocate highlights the profound impact of the atomic bombings on individuals, communities, and the world, emphasizing the importance of preserving wartime memories and promoting a nuclear-free future. Dr. Tatsuichiro Akizuki. Dr. Tatsuichiro Akizuki was a Japanese physician best recognized for his work during and after World War II, particularly in Hiroshima, Japan. Dr. Akizuki was there in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, when the atomic bomb was dropped. Despite being in the city during the explosion, he survived the immediate aftermath and dedicated himself to providing medical care to the injured and radiation-exposed survivors. Dr. Akizuki's experiences treating victims of the atomic bomb inspired him to investigate the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. He rose to prominence as a leading authority on radiation sickness treatment and long-term health implications. He advocated for traditional Japanese medicine, namely the utilization of a diet high in seaweed, miso, and brown rice to help guard against radiation. He found that his patients who followed this diet were more resistant to radiation-related diseases. Dr. Akizuki's holistic approach to medicine, which combined traditional and modern approaches, has left an indelible mark on the field of health and wellness. His work on radiation sickness and promotion for healthy living has influenced approaches to healthcare and wellness. Dr. Akizuki's book, Nuclear Disaster Medicine, shares his knowledge and experiences treating survivors of the Hiroshima atomic attack, as well as his opinions on healthcare in the context of nuclear disasters. His commitment to medical care, study into radiation sickness, and advocacy for traditional healing practices have earned him acclaim in the medical community, particularly for his work following the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Radiation's legacy. The everlasting echoes atomic consequence and their global ripples. The massive detonations at Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked the first and only use of nuclear weapons in warfare. These events, which were unprecedented in their devastation and anguish, inspired a detailed scientific inquiry into the long-term ramifications of surviving such weaponry. The Japanese government began measuring and understanding the long-term health consequences of nuclear war in 1947. This data is compiled by the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, which receives funding from the Japanese and American governments. RERF monitored around 100,000 survivors, 77,000 of them children, and 20,000 who had not been exposed to radiation. The information provided by these studies has been essential in estimating the dangers of radiation exposure. Because each survivor knew exactly where they were at the time of the bombing, their radiation dose could be properly measured. RERF's results have helped to establish safety standards for those working in the nuclear business, as well as the public. Using more than 60 years of data, specialists investigated the consequences of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on survivors and their offspring. They discovered a significant disparity between people's overall perceptions about the impacts of the atomic bomb and reality. It is widely assumed that survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have a high cancer load, a markedly shorter lifetime, and offspring with high frequencies of mutations and deformities. After comprehensive evaluation of the data, experts determined that this was an inaccurate assumption. Cancer rates were found to be greater in survivors of the blasts than in those who were out of town at the time of the explosions. The risk of cancer rose with proximity to the location, age, and gender. Fortunately, most survivors did not acquire cancer. Because most people were only exposed to small amounts of radiation, the chance of acquiring solid tumors increased by 10% between 1958 and 1998. This reflects an additional 848 cancer cases among 44,635 survivors. However, the situation was worse for those who took higher doses. Individuals who received only 1 gray performed worse. A gray is a unit of measurement that represents the absorption of 1 joule of radiation energy per kilogram of matter, or 1,000 times the public's typical safety level. These people were 42% more likely to develop cancer. Even in those who received the highest doses of radiation, the risk of cancer was increased, but their lifetime was shortened by only 1.3 years. RERF also monitors the health of the children of survivors. So far, no harmful health impacts or mutations have been identified in the progeny. Experts predict that as genetic technologies improve, minor changes in their genomes will become more visible. However, it is apparent that any detrimental health implications for survivors' offspring are minor. In their research, professionals explain the causes for the disparity between popular perception and facts. People are always more terrified of unfamiliar threats than familiar ones. People, for example, often ignore the dangers of coal, both to those who mine it and to the general population who are exposed to atmospheric pollution. Radiation is also far more detectable than many chemical threats. A handheld Geiger counter may detect extremely small levels of radiation that pose no health danger at all. Effects on wildlife. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II had disastrous implications not only for human populations, but also for the surrounding environment and fauna. The massive heat and explosion consequences of the atomic bombings devastated the plants, woods, and habitats surrounding Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Many animals were killed instantaneously by the heat and shock waves, while others were seriously injured. The atomic bombings emitted large amounts of radiation into the environment, causing long-term consequences on fauna in the afflicted areas. Animals exposed to high doses of radiation developed genetic alterations, illness, and mortality, comparable to the effects on human populations. The bombs disrupted and degraded local ecosystems, impacting species diversity, food chains, and habitats. Many animals lost their natural habitats, food sources, and breeding sites, posing challenges to their survival and reproduction. Radioactive fallout from atomic explosions contaminated soil, water, and vegetation, causing radiation to accumulate in the food chain. Animals that ate polluted vegetation or prey absorbed radiation in their bodies, resulting in negative health effects and lower survival rates. The long-term consequences of radiation exposure on fauna in Hiroshima and Nagasaki lasted years after the explosions. Genetic changes and anomalies in animal populations, diminished biodiversity, and continued difficulties to ecosystem recovery have all been documented in studies. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had long-lasting consequences on the environment, particularly wildlife populations and ecosystems. The devastating legacy of the bombings highlights the need of understanding the effects of nuclear weapons on all elements of life on Earth, as well as the essential need for worldwide efforts to prevent similar catastrophes in the future. Rescue and recovery efforts. Following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II, massive rescue and recovery efforts were started to assist survivors and address the devastating repercussions of the explosions. In the immediate aftermath of the bombings, medical personnel, first responders, and volunteers worked feverishly to provide emergency medical care to those injured. Hospitals and medical institutions were inundated with injured people suffering from burns, explosion injuries, and radiation illness. Triage systems were designed to prioritize and treat injured people according to the severity of their injuries. Medical teams performed triage assessments to properly allocate resources and offer immediate medical care to individuals who were most gravely injured. Search and rescue teams were dispatched to identify and retrieve survivors buried beneath debris and wreckage left by the blasts. Rescuers worked to find those buried in collapsed buildings and to rescue survivors who needed rapid medical care. Relief organizations, military forces, and humanitarian agencies were mobilized to supply survivors with critical resources such as food, water, shelter, and medical supplies to help them recover. Temporary shelters were built to house displaced people and families. Following the rapid rescue and medical operations, long-term rehabilitation and care programs were created to help survivors recover physically and emotionally. Rehabilitation programs, counseling, and community activities were critical in assisting survivors to reconstruct their lives and communities. To reduce the long-term health hazards and environmental repercussions in the impacted areas, efforts were launched to disinfect and clean up the radioactive fallout and environmental contamination caused by the bombings. In the face of enormous devastation, the rescue and recovery efforts following the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings displayed incredible resilience, compassion, and togetherness. The coordinated reaction of medical personnel, relief organizations, and volunteers was critical in assisting survivors, rebuilding communities, and initiating the healing process in the aftermath of the horrific. Bernard Baruch. Bernard Mans Baruch was an American banker and politician. In 1946, President Harry S. Truman appointed Baruch as the United States envoy to the United Nations Atomic Energy Commission. On Friday, June 14, 1946, Baruch presented his Baruch Plan, a modified version of the Acheson-Lilienthal Plan, to the UNAEC, proposing worldwide control over the then-new atomic energy. The Soviet Union rejected Baruch's suggestion as unfair, citing the fact that the United States already had nuclear weapons. It advocated that the United States destroy its nuclear weapons before establishing a system of controls and inspections. Baruch resigned from the commission in 1947. His influence waned as his views diverged further from those of the Truman administration. Long-term effects and memorialization. Many survivors, known as hibakusha, continued to suffer the long-term consequences of radiation exposure, like cancer and other major health problems. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park and Museum commemorates the bombing's legacy and its impact on the victims, serving as a reminder of the horrific effects of nuclear weapons. The bombing of Hiroshima killed an estimated 140,000 people by the end of 1945, with many more suffering long-term health consequences. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 had far-reaching consequences. Many survivors developed radiation sickness, increased cancer rates, and other health problems because of radiation exposure. The bombs had a significant impact on both the environment and future generations. Memorializing the bombings and their victims is critical to ensuring that the events are not forgotten, while also promoting peace and understanding. Both cities feature memorials and museums that educate people about the bombings and their aftermath. These serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of nuclear warfare and the need of striving toward a future free of such weapons. To say the atomic bombs had a devastating effect on Japan and its citizens would be an understatement. Hopefully, we will never have to witness such atrocities again. What is your opinion on this matter? Why don't you let us know in the comments below? Well, that's it for now. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and let us know in the comments what you think. Check out our other videos and subscribe to be part of the fun. Click on the notification icon so you can see our new videos as soon as they're uploaded. Thanks for watching and see you next time.